Welcome to Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom, a podcast where we take your favorite series seriously. I'm your host, Chris Baker.
I'm your other host, Tom Flynn. In this episode, tentatively titled The One Without Any Dicks in It, except for Walt, who's always a dick even when he doesn't have one, we cover a 3-issue run featuring, well, a whole hell of a lot. Let's get into it. The story so far.
The totally human Heather Hudson is leading Canada's premier superhero team, Alpha Flight, after the death of her husband and team founder James MacDonald Hudson.
Walter Langowski, aka Sasquatch, fiddled with the DNA of his girlfriend Jean-Marie Bobier, aka Aurora, to separate her mutant powers from those of her brother Jean-Paul Bobier, aka Northstar, and also make her able to pass existing tests and pass as human amidst rising anti-mutant sentiment. And, you know, because he's a chode, that's why he did it. See tentative title above.
For completely unrelated, yet somehow even more justifiable reasons.
Totally justifiable.
Snowbird, a.k.a. Anne Mackenzie, a.k.a. Narya, killed Walt. His soul now lives in the giant robot box armor designed by the brilliant engineer Roger Box, but spelled differently.
We are so close to being free. Rounding out the team are Dr. Michael Two-Young-Men, a.k.a. Shaman, and his daughter Elizabeth, a.k.a. Talisman, and Hirsute Dwarf, but not really, he isn't. Anyway, Eugene Judd, a.k.a. Puck.
This brings us to Alpha Flight issue number 25, titled, And Graves Give Up Their Dead. Cover date, August 1985. Story in pencils by John Byrne, embellishing by Bob Wyacek, inking assist by Keith Williams, colored by Andy Yankus, lettered by my boy Rick Parker, edited by Denny O'Neil, Jim Shooter as editor-in-chief, and, in a new credit slot here, creative kibitzing by Bill Mantlo. Mantlo is going to take over Alpha Flight with issue number 29. He and John Byrne are going to swap books, and it was a really exciting thing that everybody was looking forward to because they were pretty hot creators at their time. And then it lasted for 6 months before John Byrne bounces over to DC because the 80s. You can fill in whatever you want there for that, folks. So, since Mantlo is not credited on the next issue and the rest of the creative team is the same, I think he and John Byrne got to chit-chatting and Bill came up with something minor or a germ of an idea that John ended up using, and John gave him credit. So, I don't think Mantlo is co-writing the story at this point, which was my first fear when I saw this credit.
On the cover, we have a large, singular figure, empty white space, that dominates the foreground of the cover, facing off against the shocked members of Alpha Flight. Heather says, "But he's dead." And Shaman says, in smaller text, "Isn't he?" It's a great callback to the cover of issue number 11, where Guardian is facing off against the shadowed figures of what we learn to be Omega Flight.
It's a very faithful recreation of the positions of every single figure on the page, made all the better because the box armor is in both of them. On both covers, the central figure is in a wheelchair, only this time it's Roger Box instead of Jerome Jackson as a bait and switch for Professor Xavier. Hey, nice to see so many wheelchair users suddenly popping up through the Marvel Universe. It's a great cover and a nice return to form for an uneven run of busy covers. There, that was a polite way of saying it, right?
That was a very polite way of saying
Thank
it.
you.
And I mean, it's nice to see DEI rearing its head way back in 1985.
Ruins everything, Tom.
Indeed. The splash intro features a defiant-looking Northstar against a dramatic red background with a word balloon from off-panel saying, "Well, Northstar, you've heard the charges. How do you plead?"
I have a nit to pick here, and unfortunately, it's with Rick Parker, who I assume listens to the show. So everyone who isn't Rick Parker, just turn it down for like 10 seconds. Thanks. Okay. Rick, why did you write his name as North-Star? You've been doing this for over 2 years at this point. This is Bush League, Rick. Bush League! Thanks for being a listener, Rick. I loved your work on Spider-Man 2099.
And we're back. Where were we?
That's a good question, because this issue doesn't ever tell us where we are. Alpha Flight is having their trademarked meeting in a random room, and this room is more random than most. There are wooden packing crates and oil drums like it's a video game setting. There is, though, a perfectly functional office chair for Aurora to lounge in.
They have gathered to throw us right back into what was going on before that whole Walt is a great beast, we have to kill him and then save his soul adventure last episode by having a stern talk with Northstar about his terrorist past revealed in issue number 22. And Northstar is having none of it, yet hasn't flown off in a huff yet.
You know, they're all upset about his terrorist past. Look, James MacDonald Hudson is a terrorist. He trashed a corporate office and stole their inventions and prevented the company from being able to more effectively mine oil. What would happen to a person in the year of our Lord 2025 if they did that? I mean, everybody's a terrorist now, Tom, right?
And then some.
Yep. We're just going to let you, the listener, fill that in there with whatever you think about what it is that we just said. Where were we? They squabble as only family can, digging at each other and getting under each other's skin when suddenly Puck bursts into the ill-defined room and says, "I was monitoring the emergency frequency. Talisman just called in that creep Calibur's busted jail and he's right in the middle of a big battle downtown with Guardian." Recall that several issues ago, Heather saw someone she thought was JMH in a packed crowd before he slipped away, leaving Heather looking as if she had seen a ghost.
And on the next page, there's a busy panel of Caliber fighting Guardian.
Jinkies!
But the focus is on Elizabeth wondering who arranged for Caliber to not just break out of jail, but also get him his armor.
It's weirdly anticlimactic to have Guardian in the background of an exposition scene as his big return to the land of the living. We were counting before we started recording, we were counting the issues that Guardian has not appeared in of Alpha Flight, even though he died in issue number 12. And it's only like 7 issues, tops, that he hasn't appeared in. But it's always been as a flashback or as, him in the scene. And now that he's here, it's just him flying around making his bad JMH quips. And the focus is really on Elizabeth. I don't like it. I do not like it, Tom.
Caliber tells Guardian, "This time all of Alpha Flight is gonna die, starting with you." Guardian replies, "Think I'll pass on that if it's all the same to you, friend. See, I've died once already, and it's not an experience I care to repeat anytime soon." He and Talisman take down Caliber, and when they can finally talk, Elizabeth says, "Excuse a personal question, Guardian, but aren't you dead?"
Alpha Flight arrives on the scene, and Guardian proves he's really James McDonald Hudson by kissing Heather dramatically in a full-page panel that would be great if it weren't for the rest of the story you're about to hear. Heather swoons and faints, which Shaman says is quite the normal reaction under the circumstances, and I would like to know if that's evidence-based, Dr. Two Youngman.
What is evidence? What are facts?
I suspect that you and I would not agree on what the word real means.
Back in the ill-defined video game loot room, Mac tells the tale of how he came back from the dead, and what follows might be the most ludicrous... No, I take that back. Is the most ludicrous explanation I think I have ever read in comics.
Before we describe to you what happens on the page, I had Tom set up his microphone and record himself while he was reading this story for the first time so that we can get his unfiltered and in-the-moment reactions. So here's that audio, and then we'll tell you what made Tom make those noises.
Oh, for Christ's sakes. Okay, this is ridiculous. And that's saying something.
Okay, here goes. Back in issue number 12, in the last 0.7 seconds between when Heather opened the door and when Guardian's suit blew up, Mac, quote, gambled on a theoretical function of the suit, the possibility that the massive power surge of the blast might be used to rupture the space-time continuum. Again, the official handbook of the Marvel Universe told us this suit runs on regular batteries. He's going to get 1.21 gigawatts out of some AA batteries hidden in his sleek form-fitting suit. He, in this 0.7 seconds, reprograms the power systems and threw himself into who knows where or when and left behind an explosion of energy, hence why there was nothing left but ash from the quote-unquote carbonized air. And I remember being 11 years old and asking my dad if carbonizing the air around you was possible, and my dad laughed at me.
Listener, if you don't think that is ludicrous, I want you to make a mental note of exactly where your line for ludicrous is, because I promise we're going to pass it. Turn around, piss on it, go a little further, come back again just to set it on fire to feel something, and then just sprint very, very far ahead of it. It's really just a matter of when.
Mac finds himself on the surface of an alien world that turns out to be Ganymede, the largest of Jupiter's moons. Boy, when Alpha Flight has unnecessarily specific locations, I really think Ganymede might be the most unnecessarily specific location in all of Alpha Flight.
I gotta say, Byrne's undoing a lot of the good work he did, like highlighting Canada and all that, by just dropping his ass on Ganymede. I don't know.
From we don't know where, we've gone to Ganymede. Within seconds, he is all but dead from the harsh conditions, and when he comes back to consciousness, he is faced with grotesque alien beings that look like Krang from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but with way more little bitty arms, and a glass dome hat instead of a techno golem like Krang. They look like brains with flat red eyes atop a thick mustache beard combo made out of little bitty tendril arms. But there's no nose or jaw, it's just the tendrils. They are a technologically advanced race that lives in the deeply buried water on Ganymede, so the tendrils constantly flow around like hair underwater. They're deeply off-putting.
I think Byrne was getting into some anime. He says, just wait. He says they called themselves the Quorlin. Don't bother trying to pronounce it. It took me months to get my mouth to wrap around it in a manner that satisfied them. Ew! It is spelled Quwrlln. I assume there's like a trill on the double L or something like a cat. Guys, I don't like pronouncing the L's, and this is just a nightmare for me. It's terrible. It's like a cat's purr, but terrible. Like a terrible cat's purr. Like a cancerous dying cat's purr.
They're brain octopuses, or they're brain jellyfish that purr like cats. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting way to put it because it is very close to another odd name in literature that I think is worth mentioning. As a kid, I, for some reason, read a whole lot of the Cat Who mystery books, and the main character is James Mackintosh Quillerin, who is quite protective of the idiosyncratic spellings of his middle and last names, which are M-A-C lowercase k in Tosh and Quwilleran, respectively. He also has a luxurious mustache as his defining feature. And the L's don't quite fit right to say it is a direct homage, but I triple dog dare you to find another name that involves the letters Q, W, R, N, and two L's.
Chris, those books began publication in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
Is there any possibility that James Mackintosh Quillerin, James McDonald Hudson?
Oh.
I'm just saying.
Look, it's out there. If any of you know anything about John Byrne being a fan of the Cat Who books, and even if he wasn't a fan, if he just read them, because, I don't know. Hey, people have stormed into pizza places and shot their weapon over sillier rumors than this, right?
Yep. Anyway, this is a little bit of a lit crit a la Umberto Eco, where you work within the bounds of the text. You can bring things from outside, but it's there on the page, so it's worth, it's not a radical leap, quite frankly. But moving on. We'd like to just call them the Q race, but can't because of that whole Star Trek connection. But you know what? Fuck it. This predates Q, and frankly, it seems like some folks, specifically John Byrne, have kind of given up caring in the writing of this comic, so cool. They're the Q race.
The Q race patch up Mac as best they can and help him to, quote, heal from the trauma of his death and teach him about their culture and philosophy. When Mac is healed in body and soul, he asks to go back to Earth, and when the Q race use their tech to look in on Earth, only for Mac to see he was in fact 10,000 years in the past.
Listener, have we passed your ludicrous threshold yet?
Oh yeah, by the way, this whole time, Mac is swimming through the water in this techno suit that covers his whole body, and then there's a dome over his head. So he's been living underwater for apparently months or something like that. Yeah. So they put Mac into suspended animation for 100 centuries to let him catch up with his time on Earth.
How about now? I have been drinking for the last little while.
When Mac wakes up, he quickly surmises that the Q race has engaged in a world war of some sort and managed to bomb themselves back to the Stone Age, and nothing of what he knew of their civilization existed anymore, just twisted, devolved remnants.
La plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
With nothing left to tie him to Ganymede, Mac gets in the spaceship that still exists and is fueled and ready to go, and blasts off for Earth without ever looking back.
So Mac crashes to Earth off the coast of British Columbia, narrowly missing Marina. But did he miss her? Probably not. Scrounges some clothes and makes his way to
Nobody ever misses Marina, Tom.
Nope. Scrounges some clothes and makes his way to Vancouver, where he also saw Heather, but I couldn't bring myself to face you, realizing how long it had been since my death, realizing the changes in my life and yours. I thought, at least at that moment, that it might be better if you went on thinking I was dead, went on with your life without me.
This sounds like a deadbeat druggy parent's excuse for missing Sally's dance recital.
Picking up where we are now, Mac and Heather declare their undying love for each other when Mac reveals one last surprise. As he rips the cloth of his guardian costume open, he explains, "They put me back together again, but they'd never seen a human being before. They had no way of knowing what was me and what was my armor. So they improvise." He removes the cloth of his suit to reveal he wears thick trunk-looking briefs that are just like Walt's, but instead of orange, it's red. Shocking!
And they don't have like elastic at the top. They have like this, like it's drawn to be thicker at the top. It's such a weird undergarment to wear. It looks like a diaper, Tom.
And this is clearly the shocking thing.
I am a diaper fetishist, Heather. That's what I learned on the land of Corrin.
I mean, that's the least of what he learned.
His body is perfectly human-shaped, but the flesh is intermixed with metal from head to toe, like that horrifying scene in Superman 3 that scarred me as a kid. My question now is, Tom, they didn't know what a human was supposed to look like, so does that mean they didn't know what to do with his... Is he like Snowbird now?
Moving right along. The book ends with a small scene of Walt bashing rocks, getting used to his new robot body, while Roger Box admonishes him to not break his expensive robot toy.
Walt replies, "I mean, if this is gonna be home sweet home now that my real body's been destroyed, well, a fella should be able to have some fun."
To which Aurora replies, "But what kind of fun, Sher Walter? Court into my machine like that."
"Oh, hey, it's still me in here after all. You love me for my mind too, don't you?"
That is something I will have to think about. And she flies off.
As Walt processes this, did you get that pun, Tom? He's in a robot body, so he's thinking about it. So what's he doing, Tom?
What I love about this is that I totally got it, and then you decided to walk all over your dick explaining it. But maybe you did that because, you got one.
I got you good, you fucker. Roger says, "Not surprising, though, is it, Mr. Lankowski? From what I've seen of Mademoiselle Beaubier, well, it seems like her needs would require more than any generation of my box series could provide." Walter says, "And just what is that crack supposed to mean?" Roger says, "Oh, nothing offensive, sir. Only that Mademoiselle Beaubier is, well, a very physical lady. She needs a man with a real human form, and I think we know how to get you one."
So apparently, Roger and Walt are going to steal some of that good Roxxon sexbot research and build the box armor a dick. I never expected to be recorded saying dick so much, and I blame Walt for this. This is Langowski's goddamn fault.
For an episode that has no dicks in it, we've said dick a lot, haven't we?
Oh my God.
And for a book that has sex as one of its main themes, we suddenly seem to have 3 sexless characters on the team between apparently JMH and Snowbird and now Walt in his box prison.
No longer armor, prison.
And listeners, by the way, this is not the last time Aurora dumps Walt because he doesn't have a dick. It only happens twice, which isn't a lot, but it's still more than any of us would have bet money on before starting this series.
I'd also argue that sexlessness as a major plot conflict point moving the story along kind of, tracks. It does seem to be a real, major motivator for a lot of these folks.
Look, I will grant John Byrne this. It does feel like he is very much on his way out and not really putting his best effort into tying this together into a compelling story that's moving forward. But I do find this to be utterly in character for Aurora and absolutely what she would do in the circumstances that she's in. And I can't say I blame her. Just, maybe critique a little bit on the how.
All this is in character. Walt,
for
Walt
both
being
all 3 of them, actually.
All of them. Walt being concerned about, for the love of Christ, this man tried to turn himself into a Hulk-like being, but botched it so badly that he unleashed, a supernatural horror that he was slowly losing control over. Of course he's going to want to find a way to give himself a dick. That's just... He is a penis. That's all he is... id made manifest, covered up by some idea of secret agent and doctor and linebacker and crap. Oh, I cannot stand this.
All right. Well, let's talk about the last one here then, Roger Box, because he's sort of an afterthought in this issue, but he's working his way onto the team nicely. One thing that you may have caught in our quotes, listener, is that he refers to all of Alpha Flight members by their honorific and their last name. So he says Mrs. Hudson, Mademoiselle Beaubier, Mr. Judd, that kind of thing. However, In this issue alone, he refers to both Walt and Shaman as Mr., ignoring the fact that they are both doctors. I don't think it's a slight. I think Box has learned that politeness from him goes a long way towards not being ignored or dismissed due to his disability. And I think that's one of his coping mechanisms of moving through the world, is being polite and deferential like that.
I completely buy that. I like to think, though, that it is a slight at Walt and unintentional as it perverts.
I would absolutely believe that if he hadn't also done it to Shaman, because I know that Box actually does respect Shaman. He seems to have a genuine respect for all the members of Alpha Flight as legitimate superheroes. As far as he is concerned, he is helping Captain America in the Avengers. Yeah. I mean, he's not a bad guy now.
Well, this leads us into Alpha Flight issue number 26, titled, If at First You Don't Succeed. Cover date September 1985. Same creative team as before, minus He Who Shall Not Be Named.
The cover again has Guardian appearing in the foreground from behind, but only his left hand and the outer hip on the far right side of the cover. The main space is filled with Puck, Talisman, and Heather laying defeated on the ground, while Omega Flight members Diamond Lil, Flashback, and Wild Child pose above them. A single word appears on the cover: defeated.
The opening page is a great full-page action shot of Guardian, suit powered up, saying, "Okay, team, hit him with everything you've got," leading into the next two-page spread of Alpha Flight scoring up to fight 5 robots? They look like robots, but they talk like people. I assume they are some form of armor. I mean, look, the book doesn't say one way or another, so I'm going to call them robots. They're collectively called the Macro System. And yes, just to be very clear, this is jarring. Like, there is no clear connection between any of the final scenes of the previous issue and what's going on here. I flip back just to be like, wait, am I reading this right? Did I miss something? Nah, they're just dropping you in.
This fight lasts almost 10 pages and is utterly inconsequential. It's half the book. The only cool thing is that the 5 robots join together to make one big robot, like the Destructicon Transformers forming Destructor, and then Walt kicks its shiny metal ass. Oh, and Mac injures Aurora when she gets, like, tentacled by the robot. Anyway, cut that part out.
Nope. It only took 26 issues for that sort of thing to crop up. Unless that's what Marina's been up to.
Oh, you're right. There are suddenly a lot of tentacles going on here. Damn it.
This fight is happening at the Armed Forces Proving Grounds because the Macro System is a Canadian military experiment, and they needed one final test against unconventional forces to get this system put into production. Apparently, the Canadian military started watching Voltron and got some ideas.
Yeah, and after watching their Macro System get its ass kicked by Sasquatch, not Sasquatch, excuse me, I can't say that. After watching them get their ass kicked by secret agent superhero linebacker Dr. Walter Lankowski in the box armor, they're going to now put it into production? Really? It can get beat by Box. And not the Box that's later that's awesome. No, we got beat by Walter Box? Dude, you don't put that into production. You fire the guy that came up with it.
I just want to point out how much time and effort. I mean, I grant you this is just where the armor's where his soul had to go, but Walter is not okay. He's got some real issues about himself and power and like needing to be more. I'm not saying this to say like I feel for him. I think this is reflective of an unexamined kind of shitty life.
Well, and I think it is important to note that we are seeing that Walter's character arc, his thing, you know, if Aurora's thing is that she has mental issues, Walt has body issues. And, you know, he's not in his own body a lot. And this is not even the last time. There's several more bodies he's going to go through. That, I think, is part of what helps move Walt from the dick we've all come to know and loathe into the guy that we see in Deadpool #1, who is actually not a bad guy, you know, like, and he moves on to become a leader of Alpha Flight for one of the iterations, I think 2 of the iterations.
I'll believe it when I see it, but we should move on.
But yes, I think that those body issues and the experience of not being tied to that physical form helps to break him out of some of those bad habits that he had when it was just him in his body and realizing the limits of his body and wanting to transcend them through any means necessary. And now that he's transcended it and he's felt life and all these other things, he can be more comfortable in his own Walter skin.
A query. The box armor at this point, Walt inside of it is basically using it and moving like he's still in his Sasquatch form.
Yes.
Like he's just using it as a bruiser. Now, you've mentioned, and I know from our little look ahead, that the box armor eventually has more capabilities than that. But at this juncture, is it purely a bruiser?
Yes.
Or can it do...
It's just the robot that Roger Box had designed. What it becomes later is when Madison Jeffries is using it like silly putty.
Okay, because I was just kind of thinking to myself, this also demonstrates a lack of imagination on Walt's part.
Oh, yeah, no, he can't transmute it. That's all Jeffries' power that does that. It's not the armor.
That's fine. I was looking for the opportunity to shit on Walt, and you know what? I've had a lot of those, and I will have more.
The only bit of consequence here is Puck and Shaman commenting how weird it is to see people casually talking to Guardian. His death has not been made public knowledge. So far as everyone in Canada is concerned, Guardian is still the premier superhero on Canada's premier superhero team.
You know, we always say Canada's premier superhero team because that's what's on the cover of Alpha Flight Volume 2, Number 1. Does Canada have another superhero team?
I would absolutely read that book. It would be like the Great Lakes Avengers. You could even put them in a city on a Great Lake and call them the Great Lakes Flight.
That could also be the name of a hydroplane tour company.
That's the team's cover. It's their business name and their superhero name because they're that bad at it.
A code of communication from Heather arrives and tells Mac there's a problem that needs Alpha Flight at the largest shopping center in the world, the West Edmonton Mall. Come to the West Edmonton Mall!
Hey, we get to find out where we are. Isn't this fantastic and new, Tom?
This is something different. Mac leaves Shaman and Walt to tend to a mildly injured Aurora. I mean, it is cracked ribs, which, God, those suck. And brings Puck and Talisman with him to meet Heather and Northstar on the scene. Quickly, I really hope Marvel and or Byrne got some cash from the Canadian Tourism Board for big upping this mall, which also absolutely looks like the set from the original Dawn of the Dead movie.
Oh, it probably intentionally does look that way.
Well, it might have been shot there for all we know. I mean, it probably wasn't built yet, but I would imagine it might have been cheaper to shoot in Canada for that.
I could totally see Jim Shooter spending time on the phone with the Canadian Tourism Board to get like a $500 kickback or something like that.
I mean, something totally inconsequential to the bottom line, but makes him feel like a big man. Yeah. How do you feel, man? Feel like a big man?
Very minor aside here. It's nice to see Heather and Northstar working together well. Like we don't see them interacting, but the fact that they went on a mission like this, like, you know, they don't get along, but Heather is making a point of getting along. He doesn't get along with anybody, and he's been particularly standoffish with her. It seems like she's trying to be a good leader and trying to make it all work for the whole team. So I appreciate that, but maybe that's just me looking at Heather with rose-colored glasses.
Since coming back last issue, it seems Mac has effortlessly and without comment resumed leadership of Alpha Flight, or at least field leadership, right? Everyone except Talisman and Roger Box would find that a comfortable fit despite the whole situation. You know, I'm glad to see this didn't push the totally human Heather Hudson back into her role as housewife, that she's not going back to the kitchen now that her husband is home.
They arrive and get briefed on the sitch. 3 people have chased everyone out of the mall and are threatening to blow it up, and they call themselves Omega Flight.
Guardian gets visibly upset and the team rushes into the mall. Along the way, Puck does drop the penny that Guardian was dead before, but that's just one of many instances of, what are you guys doing?
We're going to derail from the script here, Tom. I really think that there is an interesting story to be told about what the public understood about Alpha Flight in like through the mirror of what we've seen on this story. I think it's really cool to think about what that would look. You know what I want? What I want is the classic 1994 series Marvels that was drawn or painted by Alex Ross. I want that for a Canadian kid's view on Alpha Flight. And they can start with the rumors about the fight with the X-Men, and then the rumors that Guardian had died and come back. That sounds cool to me. Get on it, Alex Ross. Who is also a listener of the podcast.
I also think it'd be interesting to figure out, how much does the public know of the origins of Alpha Flight? Do they know that it's a government op? Is that just one of those conspiracy theories that's going around in zine culture at the time? I mean, and also, was that part of the calculation when the government dropped them, knowing from their very good psychologists that JMH would carry on regardless, so they get to continue to present, this Alpha Flight as protecting Canada when they don't have to pay for it anymore? I don't know. There's just a lot of fun little ways to go with this. Entering into the mall, they marvel at its combination of theme park and commerce. And Puck comments on the idea that sooner or later some bright young thing was going to put those two things together. They spread out to find their former colleagues in the first Lucky Alpha. He wrote it wrong.
Alphin.
He wrote, look, I just read the script, guys. Go fuck yourself, San Diego. The first lucky Alphen is Puck, who gets sucker kicked by Diamond Lil, the indestructible woman.
Puck says, Lillian Crowley, a.k.a. Creepy Crowley. The best figure this side of Aurora and the biggest ego this side of North Star. Twice my height and half my brain power.
Jesus.
Yeah, he just does not care for Diamond Lil. Guess who's going to join Alpha Flight and be a longtime member?
As Puck leaps at her, she yells, "Boss, now!" And Puck is suspended in midair in a familiar yellow energy field, definitely not part of Diamond Lil's power set.
Diamond Lil is not particularly strong, but she is completely invulnerable to damage, so much so that she can pluck a hair from her head and use it to slice through almost anything. Coincidentally, she wears her hair very long, possibly because it's hard to cut it.
As Puck realizes something is up, he looks up and says,
"No, it can't be."
And a white glove figure from off-panel says, "Yes, it can, Puck. Yes, it can." And slams Puck into the ground and out of the fight.
Next up, Talisman encounters Flashback. Some great back and forth dialogue between them, but the most important part is that Flashback addresses her with the slur squaw, so we know he's an asshole and don't have to care about what happens to him.
Reminder, Flashback's power is to pull himself from his future into the current moment, essentially a time-displaced multiple man situation that somehow makes even less sense than the multiple man situation.
Ugh, Flashback makes so little sense. He wears a white bodysuit with a black surplice thing on his shoulders and head, while his future versions wear the same costume but reversed. So does he just wear the reversed costume all the time in case he gets pulled back or something? Does he only change in the main costume when he's on assignment? Why doesn't he just summon future him to get stock tips and skip the supervillain shit entirely?
Here, let me help. You're in 1986 Flashback. Buy Apple stock. There. Supervillain stopped. Again, the fight is ended when a familiar yellow energy signature blasts Talisman from the sky by the same white-gloved figure, but this time we see the red sleeve above the glove.
By God, King, is that Guardian's arm I see?
Look at you with the pro wrestling reference.
Ah, I understood that reference. Northstar encounters Wildchild. Same thing, but the not-quite-revealed bad Guardian tells Wildchild,
"Wait here for the others. I have one last very special fish to fry."
What a weird way of putting it.
Page turn, and we see the totally human Heather Hudson, and folks, Chris writes it as capital H, capital H, capital H, triple H. Wrestling reference. Human Heather Hudson in her brand new superhuman? I guess same thing. Outfit.
She's not superhuman, but you can be a superhero and not be a superhuman.
We'll talk about that later.
Batman.
We'll talk about that later. It consists of white jodher pants, useful-looking red boots, a red turtleneck, and a well-tailored red jacket with a high white collar. Rounding out the look are white gloves, fancy new green sunglass visor, and a gun in a red holster on her hip. She looks great.
Heather saying, "Look, my husband became an accidental superhero and blew himself up, so I stopped being a secretary to take up his work by grabbing a gun and some sunglasses and saying, fuck it, we rollin', and everybody on Alpha Flight somehow thinks this is a good idea."
Again, it's a very cool look, and I am so glad to see she's still investing in some quality frames.
It is a fantastic look, and I think it is my favorite Heather Hudson look of all, is her in her snazzy jacket and just a fucking gun on her head.
Yeah, let's just get straight to the point. Everyone else, they're all packing heat too. It might be energy blast. It might be a magic pouch. Me, it's a 45.
I can see her giving the the whole thing. She is standing in front of what appears to be a comic shop in the mall, and if you look closely, you can make out the logos on a couple of the books on the wall. I can make out a Hulk, a G.I. Joe, and an Alpha Flight issue. That was nice.
Guardian approaches Heather, and these pages do have some dread to them. As they talk, Heather says Mac's voice sounds wrong. As he removes his helmet and keeps speaking, she realizes he's speaking in Jerry Jackson's voice, the man who organized Omega Flight to kill Mac. This causes Heather some distress. She says, "Jackson was killed when you were..." Mac says, "It's all too confusing, isn't it, Heather? Your husband's face, your enemy's voice. William, let me make it easier for you to understand." And he begins ripping his face skin off like his costume last issue. He says, "The last time we met, I looked and sounded like a woman. A woman called Delphine Courtney."
Yeah, this has really got to be fucking with Heather, because you know what they did last night.
Well,
we don't know how long it's been since they got back.
We don't know what they did or didn't do last night because we don't know what actually got replaced on Mac.
Look, love comes in many forms, so what I'll say is what Mac did for her.
Fair enough.
And this is why we've been calling this entity Mac instead of JMH, because JMH is the totally human guy who got burned to a pile of greasy ash back in issue number 12. This is Delphine Courtney. The issue ends with the reveal of Mac's strapping male body with Delphine Courtney's distinctly robot head on top. Does it get any more soap opera-y than a man coming back from the dead only to be revealed as the female sex bot assistant to the man who killed him?
A tale as old as time.
I actually saw this plot line reused by The Young and the Restless in 2013. It's an old chestnut. Listeners, have we passed your point of ludicrousness yet? Yeah, that's what I thought.
The story of Alpha Flight seems to actually be the story of Heather being traumatized over and over again.
Isn't that true of all long-running superhero stories?
Yes. And finally, Alpha Flight number 27, cover date October 1986, titled Betrayal. Same creative team as last issue.
The cover features the robot-headed guardian body that's actually Delphine Courtney holding Snowbird by the throat, pointing at Shaman saying, "The choice is yours, Shaman! If you save Snowbird, your daughter dies!" While Talisman is in some kind of energy portal thing. Look, Byrne's covers are best when they're singular and trippy. The action scene covers just leave me cold.
In the Edmonton Mall, Delphine Courtney brings together Omega Flight and their Alpha Flight captives and starts choking out Talisman to get her scared enough to instinctively summon Shaman and the rest of Alpha Flight into her trap. And speaking of the rest of Alpha Flight, we take a slight breather to catch up on what they are doing wherever it is they are doing it.
Yeah, the lack of location for the team this arc is really jarring. The book starts out with, unnecessarily specific locations like 138A Laurier Drive in Ottawa. And now we don't know where Alpha Flight is. Sometimes they're in a room with packing crates and oil drums. And now we're in a hyper-techno lab with all kinds of equipment that can only be a government defense installation. This is going to get straightened out in just 2 issues when Mantlo takes over and the team actually moves into Tamarind Island like Byrne was building towards 7 issues ago now? Byrne really got waylaid from his story with Walt's death and this Courtney subplot. It seems things aren't being seeded for the future use anymore. He's just tying up what he had going on.
Shaman is patching up Aurora's broken ribs, and Walt and Roger Box have been working on Walt's body problems, specifically finding him a biological one and one with a dick for, as a preference. Since Sasquatch's body came from another dimension, Roger figures, hey, that worked out so well, let's do it again. So they start looking in other dimensions for a body for Walt. I mean, it worked out so well. Why would we stop? Roger uses the interdimensional scanner he built off-panel, Jesus, in the last issue and finds a nexus of realities and scans a body. Because...
Yeah, that would be 3 issues in another book. You know what I mean?
Well, it would have been 3 issues in the earlier version of this book, but yeah,
that's true.
Here we are. This is comics, everyone, especially when someone's about to jump off a series, I guess.
Oh, well, and Secret Wars 2 is going on, and there's a lot of stuff happening in Marvel, and if you're having to create all that, it would be a weird time to have to be a high-level writer, artist guy who's producing several books for Marvel. I can see where that would be difficult in the Secret Wars 2 era. So there you go, John Byrne. I will absolutely give you that slack.
He can. The image the scanner produces is undefined, but any comics reader can look at the shape and realize that we are looking at the Incredible Hulk.
Walt says, "Isn't that great? Humanoid, virtually no brainwave pattern that we can detect, and built like a brick shipyard." Yeah, that's the Hulk, all right. No brain and built like a brick shipyard.
Aurora says, "Fantastique!" thus definitively answering the question of whether she was dating Walt or Sasquatch. Apparently Aurora likes to feel like small girl, I guess. And the smaller, the better. Just a quick note, folks. As I was reading the comics in preparation, and as we've discussed, I don't read the comics until Chris finishes the script, and then I read them, and then I go through the script myself, and we make some adjustments, and blah, blah, blah. Once I got to this point, I'm like, well, the answer is that question, and I have full faith that Chris will write that into the script, and I was not disappointed. I appreciate you rewarding my faith in you, bruv.
The woman knows what she likes, and she likes them big.
At that moment, Shaman senses Talisman's pain and fear, because she was apparently, able to listen in on Aurora's thoughts, and that would have scared the shit out of anyone. No, it's because she's being tortured. And the team rolls out.
Way off west in the Northwest Territories, Snowbird and her human lover, Doug, are wandering around his bachelor pad in states of undress when Snowbird rushes out to help her team. Recall that she had faked to the rest of Alpha Flight that she was leaving Earth so that she could learn about human love from Doug. But the peril she senses for her friends is such that she is compelled to help them. Apparently, the old-fashioned Department H, the call, has been completely replaced by just having everyone be close to a magic user.
I think it's still the call, just different. Maybe we'll add an ice cracking on a frozen lake effect to it. Or not. I also just want to point out, when we say leaving Earth, we meant like returning to the realms beyond that she originated from. And that seems totally normal. Whereas in the fake story of Mac being like blasted into time and space, him leaving Earth just seems ludicrous, right? Like I think that's something really kind of interesting about Alpha Flight. They're not supposed to be out in the stars, but jumping between dimensions, totally normal.
Yeah, about that fake story about Mac.
Oh, for the love of Christ, I don't want to say any more. Get back to the script.
Shaman teleports his crew into the mall, and I'm disappointed. The teleport effect is more like an energy portal and not the powder tossed in a circle around them. I really liked that eerie effect for teleporting, and I miss it, and I am offended that Jean Byrne forgot that that's how Shaman does it.
Courtney Delphine has replaced her Mac skin, and helmet, and continues her ruse to keep the newcomers from realizing what's going on. On that note, when she was revealing herself, like revealed to like Heather that part man, part, machine or whatever, was that just like her actual machine bits sticking out? And so she had to like construct the skin or was it all?
How did she mimic Mac's powers when she was doing all this fighting and everything? They never tell us.
Jesus. Delphine, as Mac, says the rest of Alpha has subdued Omega Flight, and in the distance we see them, like the team members, looming over Omega Flight members, but we also see that the Omega Flight members are holding them all up by their throats to make it look that way, which is, on the one hand, absolutely ridiculous. On the other hand, yeah, that's pretty much the kind of story we're getting here, guys, so it is what it is. But anyway, Smart Alec was not among Omega Flight.
Shaman, uncharacteristically, pops up with exposition and says, "Oh, of course you don't know. In our last encounter, Alec Thorne managed to steal my medicine pouch. Unfortunately for him, he also looked into it. As you know, my daughter is the only mortal who can survive that experience. Thus, Smart Alec was robbed of his mind, his soul. Not knowing what else to do with him, I reduced his mindless body to the size of a small doll and have him with me, in my pouch, even now." Fake Guardian says, You mean you're actually carrying him around with you? That's inhuman. Listeners, the robot is telling us what behavior is inhuman. I want you to remember, listeners, every act you have ever heard described as inhuman was, in fact, committed by humans. So reflect on what that means on your own time.
Yes, and point of order, how the fuck would Guardian know about Elizabeth at this point? Was he briefed? There's no real sense of time passing here, so I don't know. This just feels lazy. As far as we can tell, he shows up, he returns, and then they're promptly in the military base, and now they're here. So has there been like a week for him to get the download on the team to know that like what's going on with Walt? I mean, it just feels a little lazy. It feels a little unearned, and that has not. There have been issues that we've discussed in this series to date. It's nothing like this. This feels totally different. Also, there's a panel later on where Elizabeth repeats the same word, but not like she's worried, disturbed, but because of a script writing fuck up. She says "and" twice in a row, and it's lettered clearly as if that's what's supposed to be. And there haven't really been many, if any, of those.
Yeah, we pretty much point out the silly things like that we see, and this is not a book that's riddled with those. Like, they are noticeable when they happen.
So it feels very much and seems very much to be the case that eyes have come off the product ever so slightly. Fake Guardian snatches the bag off Shaman's hip and flies up and dips, reaching in to find her teammate and finding nothing but empty space inside. She says, "Shaman lied. There's nothing in here. Nothing at all unless if there's a secret pocket. Perhaps I can find it if I turn the blasted thing inside out."
That's a big no-no with the medicine bag. The biggest of no-nos. So many no's in this plan. Too many no's. No. Do not turn the medicine bag inside out. When she does turn the medicine bag inside out, the dimensional void that exists inside the bag begins expanding out into our reality, sucking in everything around it, including all of Alpha Flight except for Shaman and Talisman.
So she turned it inside out and began swallowing the pride.
She turned it upside down and inside out. Easy now.
Shaman wakes up a confused and drugged Talisman and tells her, "Too much to explain, let me sum up." The void that exists within the bag that the bag contains, it's loose, and it will quickly engulf the entire, well, as he puts it, this place, this nation, this world. I mean, I guess it's just going to keep going at that point. Unless she goes inside of it to serve as a powerful anchor for him to push the void back inside from the outside.
How many insides and outsides did we just say?
I mean, we might as well just be doing the Eve 6 song already, which was what I was trying to reference earlier.
I hope Max listens to the show. Elizabeth is game for this plan. Despite being new to this and not really knowing what she's doing, Talisman is brave and realistic, and she's not brash or unwise. I hate to say it, Tom. I think that she's growing on me as a character.
Plus, she's got a great costume.
Shut your whore mouth.
Talisman navigates the void, finds Alpha Flight, throws them through the portal to safety, and just as she is reaching for Shaman's hand to leave herself, a familiar yellow energy blast separates them.
We keep pointing out the yellow energy blast because there's so few energy blasts in Alpha Flight books. In an X-Men book, you got half of them who all have pink blasts that they can send out at stuff. You don't know if it's Gambit or Bishop or Jean Grey. In Alpha Flight, Guardian has yellow energy blast. That's it. He's the only one of them to project force like that, and he doesn't even use it a lot in the book. So it's easy to pick up on that visual clue and help make the reveal of this issue fun as a reader.
We are now caught up to the cover, with Guardian holding Snowbird by the throat and Elizabeth in mortal peril. Shaman tells Elizabeth to be brave for just a few moments more while he reaches into the void, just as if it were still his medicine bag, and grabs what he needs to throw at fake Guardian's face and get Guardian, Mac, Delphine, whatevs, to release Snowbird. With Snowbird safe, Shaman turns back to pull Elizabeth out and sees the collapse of the void back into the medicine bag has accelerated and Elizabeth is disappearing inside. As her outstretched hand disappears inside, she cries, "Help me! You promised!"
And that's, ouch. Michael promised Elizabeth he would save her mother from her illness, and when he couldn't do that, he fucked off to Banff National Park for 10 years. And now he's broken another promise to her to get her out safely. Michael's not gonna be okay.
The issue ends with a truly anguished-looking Shaman realizing what this victory has cost Alpha Flight.
And we end on that cliffhanger. Omega Flight fucked right on out of there once the void started swallowing everything. Alpha Flight is mostly unconscious but together in the mall, and Delphine Courtney has disappeared after releasing Snowbird.
A quick clarification point. Shaman says that he can only pull things out of the bag that will fit from the opening of the bag, and obviously Elizabeth is a touch too big for that purpose, so that's why he can't retrieve her at this specific moment.
I guess he just has to turn it inside out again.
Swallow his pride.
Well, oh God. Well, it certainly seems like a mystery that nobody on Alpha Flight has the power to solve. But you know who has the power to solve this, Tom?
Oh, I read ahead. I know.
The Beyonder has the power to solve this. That's right, listeners. We are hitting Secret Wars 2 crossover next issue, where this gets wrapped up neat and tidy. After that, we will be picking up with the Mantlo era and the transition of our creative teams with Bill Mantlo and Mike Mignola on art. So it's going to be a fun couple of episodes coming up here, folks.
And that wraps us up today. Why Not Read Alpha Flight with Chris and Tom is brought to you by the Excelsior Embroidery Company, a subsidiary of the Roxxon Corporation. New this week, we have a fun twist on the classic Luigi hat. I think you'll like it. But they are moving fast, so don't sleep on it. You can see this hat and hundreds of other designs at excelsiorembroidery.etsy.com.
Why Not is recorded in Chicago, Illinois, and deep beneath stately Baker Manor in a fashionable neighborhood outside St. Louis. It is written by Chris Baker, produced by Tom Flynn, and good lord, if you think you heard the word dick a lot in this episode, he heard twice as many in the editing, with additional cat noises provided by a chonky calico named Teeny.
Sorry you had to hear that word so much, Teeny. Why Not is released every other Monday at www.thewhynotpod.com and wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Blue Sky or email us at whynotapod@gmail.com. That's whynotehpod@gmail.com. We love to try to answer your Alpha Flight questions.
See you next time when we join up with the greater Marvel Universe in that unforgettable crossover, Secret Wars 2. Back up.
See, I love
back
that.
up.
I love
No,
that you called her
I said it
Bouvier.
wrong.
No, I love that you've said Bouvier because absolutely that's what Box would say. There's no earth in which he would pronounce it correctly. Even if he knew even if he practiced, as soon as he sees Aurora, she becomes Mademoiselle Bouvier because that's all Roger's thinking about.
Oh, they get together later.
Oh, for Christ's sakes!